I charge you never to forget the great benefits that you have received at this place, and in time to come, according to your means, to do all that you can to enable others to enjoy the same advantage. And remember that you carry with you wherever you go the good name of Christ's Hospital.
Those, you will recall, were words from the charge given by the headmaster at your final service here in this chapel, an occasion steeped in tradition like so much else here at Housie. You stood lined up on either side of the aisle waiting to be called to receive your commemorative Bible, and if you've done monitorial service, a prayer book as well. The gift of the governors of Christ's Hospital. For some, I imagine, it was a moment of relief. School days were finally over. For others, the majority, I suspect, because nowadays the figure is some 80%, it was the end only of secondary education and a way of life that shaped and influenced your entire future lives. Some of you may remember it as a rather Spartan way of life. Up at 6:55 precisely, breakfast, rushing to chapel, lessons all morning broken only by PT and milk, marching with band into lunch, and then most afternoons, sports, games, CCF, music, practice and rehearsal. And then tea in the dining hall, and so on and so on. Some of that hasn't changed, but a great deal has. Girls are now playing a pivotal role in the development of the school. But more important, a great deal more needs to be changed, and will be with your help. Of course, the great occasions of the school year are still intact. Speech day before an invited audience, which includes the Lord Mayor of London, and the highlight of which is the senior Grecian oration. Beating the retreat, which closes the school year, the daily lunch parade, the school play, the school carol service, rugby and cricket matches. Change is inevitable, especially if Christ's Hospital is to remain in the forefront of the independent school system, both academically and culturally, producing pupils who not only find their niche in our society, but also continue to excel in disciplines that are widely diverse. So, what are these changes? What will they achieve? How can you help to effect them? Well, I put these questions to the headmaster, Richard Poulton, to the clerk, Captain Michael Peary. Headmaster, tell me about these changes.
Can I start with the things that are not changes? The uniform is the same, which means the background of the children is the same. The staff is the same, the hopes are the same, and the desire to set up a stable community. But given that, there are changes of expectation and demand and opportunity. We've got a national curriculum which is pressing new subjects upon us. We've got rising expectations from parents and from pupils, and we've got a whole new society to prepare the children for.
What about staff? What about the physical conditions within the school?
The physical changes are important, both for working conditions and for living conditions and for teaching conditions. The children now need a lot more space in which to work at their new subject, the new style at old subjects. There's more technology in all sorts of ways, as a subject on its own or as backup to existing subjects. It all goes through to computer. There's more requirement for space and time and opportunity.
So change is in the air, but change is expensive.
Change is very expensive, and so are the people who are going to bring it about.
Clark, let me turn to you. What about change from your perspective?
Well, I was a pupil here in the 40s and the 50s. I had children here in the 60s and 70s. I was a governor in the 80s, and I find myself as clerk in the 90s. And despite all the pressures, I, like the headmaster, and am impressed with what has not changed. The broad mix within the school, the ability and the will to help those who need a boarding education but who could not otherwise afford it. We, for example, charge only what parents can afford and cover only 25% of our costs through fees. The ethos of caring within the school hasn't changed, the feeling of belonging. And I'm equally impressed with what has been and is being achieved. By good management, a desperate financial situation in the 1970s has been recovered. We have had and achieved the reunification of the girls' and the boys' schools here at Horsham, and that has been a brilliant success by any standards. We have built a new sports and social centre, which by good planning, tight control, was achieved in a remarkably short time and also within a very tight budget, some 30% below what many experts felt was possible. And that sports centre is up and running, is paid for, and is paying its way. We've achieved and are continuing to achieve improvements in accommodation, again at remarkably low cost by a mixture of self-help and competitive tendering. All these things are ongoing, and there is still much to be done.
Headmaster, let me come back to you and take a look, if we may, at the rate of change, the changes that are coming about in education.
What we are seeing is more and more pupils going to universities with a wider range of courses and opportunities at the end of it. And so we've got to train them to learn how to learn, to have the footing from which they can go on in many different directions now. And it is getting faster and more complicated.
At the beginning, I said that Christ's Hospital was not an ordinary independent public school, but as an outsider, I found it extraordinary. Is that a fair assessment, fair comment?
It is fair comment. I think we are the last of the great public schools in the phrase as it was originally intended, schools for the real public, regardless of their means. And whereas most independent schools now are utterly dependent on fee payers, we remain true to the ethos of caring for the poor scholar and offering an education to ordinary people.
Clark, in view of what the headmaster has just said, what's to be done? What's the future plan?
Well, we have to continue the modernisation of the boarding houses to meet the Children Act, and that costs about £60,000 per house. We have to build 2 new staff houses at a cost of some £220,000. We have got to refurbish classrooms which have not been touched since they were built at the turn of the century. And we've got to provide for modern technology, which requires much greater space as well as equipment. And that will be the order of £1 million plus. And this has to be achieved against a backdrop in real terms of falling revenue and escalating costs. So it is quite a challenge for the future.